For many of us, the holidays can be a very discouraging, very depressing time, and the season between Thanksgiving and New Year's can often be a very difficult time for people. It can be distressing, it can be depressing, and it can be very discouraging. And so I want to help you this week with some thoughts, with some ideas on how to not be discouraged, how to overcome discouragement. Lots of things in our life, if you look around, can cause us to lose hope, can cause us to be very discouraged. Maybe it's a situation in your family, or maybe it's the national scene, or maybe it's the news, or maybe it's a personal relationship. But there are a lot of things that can lead to us being discouraged. And God does not want us to be discouraged. He wants us to be encouraged so that we can be encouraging to those around us. So we're going to look at the life of a man named Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah was an ancient Hebrew man who did not grow up in Israel. He was part of a large group of people who were deported. They were taken from their homeland in Jerusalem in Israel, and they were taken to Babylon, and they lived there for 70 years. Nehemiah was born there. His parents were taken captive. He was born in a foreign nation that spoke a foreign language, and one day God called Nehemiah to go back home, to leave Babylon, and to go back to Jerusalem and to begin to repair it. When Nehemiah got there, his home city, the capital city, the shining star of his nation, Jerusalem, was just in shambles. The walls were almost all the way torn down. The buildings were dilapidated and hadn't been lived in for 70 years, and it was a mess. Everything was terrible. And the people who were with Nehemiah became discouraged. They had good reason to be discouraged. The place where they lived, the place where they longed to be, was in a shambles. But Nehemiah told them in chapter 4, verse 13, "Do not be discouraged. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious." It was a command. Do not be discouraged. But he didn't just leave them with the instruction. He gave them some things to do. And the things that they did can encourage us. And if we can figure out how to work those into our life, we can avoid discouragement too. The first thing that Nehemiah did was he walked around the city, he walked around the wall, and he made note of all of the weak places. He would walk around and he would notice that the wall was completely destroyed in one area. He would see that a tower needed to be rebuilt. He took an honest assessment of all the weak areas in the wall of the city. And this is an important thing for us to do, to take an honest assessment of the weak areas of our life. Well, where are we weak? Are we out of shape? Are we out of discipline? Do we struggle with some sin? What are the weak areas of our life? Now, the struggle is, the temptation is, to one, not be honest with yourself about the weak areas of your life, and two, to just ignore them, even though you are aware of them. And that's not what Nehemiah did. The scripture tells us in chapter 4 that Nehemiah placed soldiers by family in the weak points of the wall. He identified the weak points, and then he rearranged the schedule of some people, and he made them camp out in the weak spots of the wall so that they could be guarding that area, so that they could see enemies coming, and so that if they had to, they could defend that area of the wall. And so this is a good practical thing that we can do. We can be honest with ourselves about our weakness, we can be aware of it, and then we can reinforce that area. If we're out of shape, we can reorder our schedule and start to exercise and diet. If we're in debt and our finances are a mess, well, then we can reorder that, and we can strengthen our weakness by redoing our budget or finding a different career or job. There are a lot of things you can do if you're willing to be honest about where you're weak, and then not ignore that area, but reinforce the area. Nehemiah's encouragement was to avoid discouragement by reinforcing the weak areas. But it all goes back to his command to remember the Lord who is great and glorious. If you're discouraged today, a couple things you can do. Take an honest look at the weaknesses in your life and do something to reinforce them. And while you're doing that, remember that the Lord does not want you to live discouraged. Remember how great and glorious he is. And then push through that discouragement by reinforcing the weak areas so that you can become encouraged and encouraging. None of us are meant to live a life without hope. None of us are meant to live out our days discouraged. So today, as a Jesus follower, You serve a great and glorious God who has a way for you to come out of discouragement and be an encouraging person. I hope you find it. I hope you find it by reinforcing the areas that need a little work in your life. Have a great day today.